Good afternoon, folks. My name is Colleen Moore. I hope you've heard of my name. It's because I was one of the most famous movie stars of the silent film era. And if I still don't sound familiar to you, you should know me for popularizing the famous haircut of the 20s. And if I still don't sound very familiar, I hope you've seen my dollhouse at the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry. Now, I was born Kathleen Morrison in Port Huron, Michigan on August 19, 1899. Although I may have told the press 1901 in the past, but who hasn't? Now, I grew up with my mom, dad, little brother Cleve, and my grandmother. We moved around a lot when I was little, and by the time I was 12, we lived in Port Huron, Michigan, Hillsdale, Michigan, Atlanta, Georgia, Warren, Pennsylvania, and finally settled down in Tampa, Florida, where I spent some of the happiest years of my childhood. Now, ever since I was a little girl, I was in awe of the moving picture stars of the day, like Lillian Gish and Mary Pickford, and of course Charlie Chaplin. And I kept a scrapbook of their pictures and kept one page blank so that one day, if I became a star, my picture would go in it. Now, one time, a neighbor of ours ordered a piano, and I convinced the delivery man to let us have the crate, which my friends and I kept, for a stage, and we performed little shows for the neighbors. Now, my family spent most of our summers up in Chicago with my Aunt Lib and Uncle Walt. My Aunt Lib showered me with dolls and miniature furniture, which started my passion for dollhouses. One time, now down the street from where my aunt and uncle lived, there was the NSC Film Production Company. And my friend Helen Ferguson and I, we skipped school one day to try to be extras in a film. After getting turned down multiple times, we finally got in. My uncle saw my passion for performing and called the famous producer D.W. Griffith, who owed my uncle a favor. Griffith ordered a screen test for me, mainly because my one eye is green and my other eye is blue, and he wanted to make sure it wouldn't show up on the screen. The day we shot the screen test, I went back up to the makeup room to see my friend Helen. She saw I had been crying. She said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Don't worry, I was told to act jealous, and so I decided to cry." She asked how I did it. And I said, "Well, you know how I love Charlie Chaplin?" She said, "Yeah." "And you know how I hate spotted neckties?" She said, "Yeah." I pictured Charlie Chaplin in a spotted necktie, which put me to tears. Her as well. Back in Tampa, my uncle gave us a call and told us that I could go ahead and go to Hollywood, pursue my dream. The screen test came back good. My parents were not fond of the idea at the time, but they got used to it, and soon my grandma and I were on a train to California in 1917. I shortened my name to Colleen Moore so it would fit nicely on a marquee, and I signed a contract with Triangle Fine Arts. My first film was The Bad Boy, and my second film was my first Western, Hands Up. Now, even after only a few months in Hollywood, the Chicago Daily Tribune already recognized me for my acting and complimented me on my marvelous shrieking. So I was very flattered by that. 6 films later and 2 bankrupt film production companies, I had finally made a name for myself. From 1920 to 1922, I did 12 more films and was engaged to my first husband, John McCormick. 6 films later, in 1923, John and I were married, he became my producer, and I was working on the film that would make my career. Flaming Youth was the reason I chopped off my hair and adapted the styles of the flapper I portrayed in the film. Now, the flapper, which was seen as single and scandalous, was now seen in a different light because of me. This was the height of my career, and I was making over $12,000 a week.
Whoa! Wow.
Which was very impressive for a woman actor at the time.
Wow.
Now, in about the late 1920s, I started doing more comedic films. People loved me in those. I did Alice Cinders and Why Be Good, 2 of my most notable comics. And then in about 1929, around the same time, my father built me a dollhouse, one of my 4, with its tallest tower being nearly 12 feet tall. I employed over 100 set designers and artists, and it became known as one of the largest and most intricate dollhouses in the world. During the Depression, I had it going around the world earning money for children's charities, and it collected over $500,000. Wow. Now, in about 1929, the talking pictures became all the rage, so I took a break from Hollywood. In 1930, John and I divorced, and in 1932, I married New York stockbroker Albert Parker Scott. We had very lavish lives living in Hollywood. We threw parties and supported the Summer Olympics that year. But in about 1934, I divorced him and went back to Hollywood to try my hand at the talking pictures. After 3 unsuccessful films, I decided it was time to officially retire. My last film was The Scarlet Letter in 1934. Now, in about 1937, I married again to widower Homer Hargrave Jr., and since I never had any children of my own, I was very lucky to adopt his son and raise him. Now, a couple of years later, I decided to have the Museum of Modern Art take care of my pictures, so they would be, kept forever. I was very proud of them. Warner Brothers asked for them back, which was the company that took over a previous company of mine, and soon they were forgotten. Years later, I inquired about them and was told that they had deteriorated beyond repair. So, with my heart broken, I was very sad to say that they are considered lost. As for my legacy, I hope to be remembered as Colleen Moore, film actress, dollhouse collector, and of course flapper. Because, like I've said in the past, the flapper has charm, has good looks, has good clothes, has intellect, and of course, a healthy view on life.